By now, you're starting to see your patterns. You understand where they came from. You understand what you believe about yourself and what you've been taught to believe about life. And you also understand why it's been so hard to change. So now the real question becomes, how do I actually do something different? Thank you for joining me again, the Becoming Her Voice series, a voice journal by Brittany Britt. Awareness is powerful, right? But awareness without action keeps you in the same place. And this is where most people get stuck because no one really shows you what the process actually looks like. So, I want to walk you through how I approach this work and what I guide women through when they are ready to actually change. This is what I like to call the VENT method. VENT, the VENT method. And so the V is for vent, meaning to release. First, you have to let it all out, not suppress it, not minimize it, not try to make sense of it too quickly. You have to give yourself space to actually feel and express what you're beholden in. Right? Because we often carry a lot of stuff, a lot of emotion and feelings that we have been holding and carrying for many, many years. We also may be holding and carrying things that were never ours to begin with, but was handed off to us. And we didn't realize that exchange, but at some point it happened. And so releasing it all is getting it out. This could look like journaling, speaking it out loud, just allowing yourself to finally say what you've been keeping inside. And let me tell you, journaling saved my life. Since a young girl, I kept everything inside. Because that one time I did speak up, that I mentioned in another video, when someone said, "Oh, what's wrong with you?" And then I would express what's wrong with me, "Oh, girl, you okay?" From that moment, after I became aware and started doing some reflection, I realized that's where that came from. Where from then on out, I started to hold everything in. I started to keep everything to myself. And so as from a young child, I'm just walking around with all of these things I'm harboring, all these emotions and these feelings, and then I don't want to say anything to anybody because then there's going to just tell me nothing is wrong with me. They're going to just say, "Girl, you okay?" And so I continued to go through my life like that, and to a point that I couldn't hold on and carry anything anymore. I was screaming inside. And so when I first learned about journaling and heard about it, and I began to journal, I began to release so much. And I didn't understand the power of release until then. The thoughts that I had in my head that was stuck and I feel like I couldn't get out, I couldn't speak to anybody, I was able to journal it out. The ideals, the dreams, the desires, the goals, the good, the bad, the ugly. I was able to finally release it somewhere. I felt so much lighter, so much brighter. A little bit more energy came back. Because what you don't release, you carry. Can you imagine all that you have been carrying for years? And so after we vent and release it out, the next thing we want to do is explore. Understand. You don't just feel it, you got to get curious about it now, right? So I get all of this stuff out and now I want to know, where did this come from? When did I feel this way? When was the first time I noticed this? Where did I even learn this from or pick this up? Or what did I learn in that moment? You start to get curious. You start to ask questions because awareness already flashed. Now, the next step is to get curious about it, to explore what it is. That's the part of that digging deep. So, like, if you notice you overgive in relationships, it's not that you just need to stop. You need to ask yourself, when did I learn that love had to be earned? And so, next is navigate, which is choosing differently. This is where you start choosing differently, right? In real time. Not perfectly, not all at once, but this is where it must happen. Remember what I mentioned earlier. When that flash happened, that flash of awareness, you have two options, left or right. And what you choose will determine what your outcome will look like. But you are navigating intentionally, not on autopilot, not because you're in survival mode and you just got to do what you got to do, but it's intentional navigation. And so, for example, right, you catch yourself over explaining, and instead you pause. You notice the urge to overgive, and you choose not to. You notice that if you don't show up, then everything will fall to crumbles. Well, sometimes you let it fall to crumbles, especially if it's at your expense, meaning at the detriment to your emotional, physical well being. Let it crumble. And so the next layer of this is to transcend. This is where you're no longer reacting, you're becoming someone new. This is where that identity switch, that identity transformation takes place. Because now you have new patterns, you have new beliefs, you have a new thought process that automatically creates someone new because you're no longer walking and talking how you used to. You're no longer accepting certain things that you would usually would accept. You now have boundaries, and so people can't play with you like that. You're building those new patterns, new responses, a new identity. And so this isn't something that just happens overnight. This isn't something that comes from one journal entry, from one realization. This is a process. And it requires you to keep showing up to yourself in different ways. And I think people get tripped up in that, right? They think they do something one time or consistently for a month and they're like, where's the change? Why is it not happening? Do you know how long it took you to become the person that you couldn't even recognize and you didn't even truly want to be? Years of that, years of operating in the same patterns, years of the same beliefs, years of doing the same things over and over and over, majority of it unintentionally, to the point sometimes it did come intentionally because it's all you knew. So it's going to take years to back that up, years to become this true person and truly walk in that identity. For some things, certain things, it may be easier to drop. You may be so bent over the whole people-pleasing thing that you may be able to drop that and change and transform that in a matter of a day. For some things, it might have such a hold on you so much that it may take a little bit more. But for the entirety of this process, it's lifelong. You have to completely show up for yourself every day. Make aligned decisions every day. That's never going to stop. In the process, your life may get a little bit easier. You may lighten the load a little more. But even in those stages, in those levels, things are going to be presented to you where you still have to choose yourself, where that awareness will still flash and you have to decide left or right. We don't change our lives in one moment. We change it in the moments that we choose ourselves differently. And so this is exactly the work I guide women through. Not just understanding themselves, but actually doing the work to shift their patterns and rebuild who they are from the inside out. As I told you earlier, that surface healing, yeah, you can do that. Yeah, it works. But for how long? How long will you see change? How long will you see results? Once you dig deep and you're able to connect your whys to certain reasons, and then you change those whys around, only then will you see that true transformation. And so I do have a mentorship. I do one-on-ones. It has been absolutely amazing. It has been fun. But I'm working on real stuff. Things that she's specifically dealing with and going through. And so I also have a journal called She Left to Save Herself. A journal for the suffocated soul. This journal is for women who have lost themselves in relationships. Whether you're still in the relationship or you're out of the relationship but still confused about how I even let that happen to me. And so I want you always to remember that you're not stuck. A lot of us just haven't been shown how to move through it. A lot of us wasn't taught the things we really needed to know to navigate life. And not because people wanted to make life hard for us. I mean, that could be some people's story. But in mine, they didn't know. How can I expect them to do something for me that they're not even aware of how to do for themselves? And so now I have this information, this knowledge. I have took the time to do certain things and to reflect on myself. I've decided to give that back. I decided to teach women the things that I feel like should have been taught to me. And I know I'm not the only one who feels that way. And so again, thank you for joining the Becoming Her Voice series. My name is Brittany Britt. If you're willing to do this work and stay on the journey with me, I'll see you on the next one.